Today's movie opens with a captivating scene of Edward Bloom, a masterful storyteller, weaving a fantastical tale about a mythical fish called the Beast to his wide-eyed son Will, who's tucked away in bed. The enchanting story continues as the scene shifts to a cozy campfire where Will and his friends are gathered around, captivated by Edward's mesmerizing narration of the same fish tale. Years later, at Will's wedding, the atmosphere is filled with joy and laughter. However, Will's happiness is spoiled by his father's fondness for spinning impossible-sounding stories. Edward regales the guests with an outlandish tale about the day of Will's birth, involving the capture of a giant catfish using his wedding ring as bait. Will, feeling embarrassed and frustrated by his father's seemingly attention-seeking lies, confronts him angrily. Edward denies his son's accusations, and their heated exchange results in a painful estrangement that lasts for 3 long years. 3 years later, Will, now living in the romantic city of Paris, France, reveals the heart-wrenching news that Edward has been diagnosed with cancer and may not have much time left. Will and his pregnant wife Josephine travel to Alabama, where they reunite with Sandra Bloom, Edward's wife and Will's mother. As Edward's health finally deteriorates, he and Will finally reconcile and begin to speak again. Desperate to know the truth about his father's life, Will implores Will to reveal the real story. In a series of vivid flashbacks, a young Edward and his friends encounter a mysterious witch in a swamp who possesses a magical glass eye. This glass eye reveals the eventual death of anyone who gazes into it. Fearless and determined, Edward insists on seeing his own death, and upon witnessing it, he gains the confidence to take daring risks. This confidence comes from the fact that he knows when and exactly how he's going to die. As Edward's body grows at an alarming rate, he becomes convinced that he's destined for greatness. Emboldened by his newfound knowledge, Edward Bloom transforms into a high school star athlete, a successful entrepreneur, and a local hero. When a mysterious monster terrorizes the town by devouring livestock, Edward bravely volunteers to confront it. He discovers that the monster is actually a gentle giant named Carl, and he persuades Carl to leave the small town of Ashton in search of a bigger, more fulfilling life. Together they embark on a thrilling adventure, with Edward receiving the key to Ashton from the grateful mayor. As they journey onward, Edward and Carl come across a dense, foreboding forest. Edward, eager to take a shortcut, ventures into the woods alone, promising to meet Carl on the other side. The forest is teeming with danger, from thorny vines to venomous snakes and swarms of bees. Undeterred, Edward stumbles upon the hidden town of Spectre, a utopian paradise where no one wears shoes and everyone lives in perfect harmony. Upon entering Spectre, Edward is warmly greeted by the charismatic Mayor Bayman, his lovely wife Mildred, and their charming 8-year-old daughter Jenny. The town is a picture of idyllic serenity, and Edward even encounters a mystical mermaid in a nearby pond. However, he soon realizes that he's arrived too early in his life's journey, and he's not ready yet to settle down in this enchanting haven. With a heavy heart, Edward bids farewell to the townspeople, promising a smitten young Jenny that he will return someday. Despite having his shoes stolen and strung up with countless others at the entrance of the town, Edward boldly continues his journey barefoot, determined to embrace the extraordinary destiny that awaits him. Under the eerie shadows of the moonlit forest, Edward's heart raced as he felt the trees themselves closing in on him, and their gnarled branches reaching out like sinister hands. With a gasp, he realized he lost his key to Ashton amidst the chaos. And desperate to escape the forest's clutches, he stumbles upon the main road where Carl, the gentle giant, awaited him. Together they ventured forth and soon discovered a mesmerizing circus, alive with colors and sounds. The moment Carl stepped onto the circus, Amos Calloway, the charismatic owner and ringmaster, and his quirky attorney Mr. Soggybottom hired him as an attraction. Carl's towering presence overshone the other local giants. As Edward's eyes scanned the big top audience, they fell upon a vision of beauty, and this made his heart skip a beat. Love at first sight struck him like a bolt of lightning, but before he could approach her, she vanished into the crowd. Edward learned that she was a family friend of Calloway's, and determined to make her his bride, he struck a deal with the ringmaster. And for every month of work, Edward would receive a single piece of information about the mysterious girl. For 3 long years, Edward toiled tirelessly at the circus, learning that his beloved adored daffodils and music. His patience wearing thin, he confronted Calloway only to discover a shocking secret. And the secret was that Amos was a werewolf. Instead of slaying the beast, Edward's kind heart led him to befriend it, playing with Amos throughout the night. Touched by Edward's compassion, Amos reveals the girl's name, and her name was Sandra Templeton. He's also told that she could be found studying at Auburn University. In the present day, the elderly Edward formed a bond with his daughter-in-law Josephine, but remained at odds with his son Will, who accused him of being a liar. Edward's voice rang with conviction as he declared, "I've been nothing but myself since the day I was born, and if you can't see that, it's your failing, not mine." Back in the past, Edward finally met Sandra at the university and professed his love. She was kind and had heard of his heroic deeds in Ashton, but she was already engaged to Edward's rival, Don Price. Undeterred, Edward embarks on a giant romantic gesture, blanketing Sarah's lawn with her beloved daffodils. However, Don's jealousy erupted into violence, and he brutally attacked Edward, who'd promised Sandra that he would not fight back. Witnessing Don's cruelty, Sandra broke off their engagement and eventually married Edward. As Edward recovered in the hospital from his injuries, he received a draft notice for the Korean War. Though sad to leave his new wife, he knew from the witch's glass eye that he would survive the war. He volunteered for the most dangerous missions, hoping for an early release, and during a parachute mission in the North Korean army base, Edward encountered Siamese twin singers Ping and Jing. He promised to help them break into the American show business if they helped him return home. The US Army declared him missing and presumed dead, and this devastated Sandra. However, after months of covert travel, Edward finally reunited with his wife and took a job as a traveling salesman to provide a better life for them. In the present day, Sandra found the telegram declaring Edward missing and showed it to Will, proving that there was indeed truth in Edward's fantastical tales. As the younger Edward stood in line at the bank, he unexpectedly encountered Winslow, an Ashton native he met years ago in the enchanting town of Spectre. Inspired by Edward's departure, Winslow had left Spectre as well, embracing a life of crime. In a twist of fate, he roped Edward into assisting him in robbing the very bank they stood in, but to their dismay, the bank had no cash for them to steal. Undeterred, Edward spent hours enlightening Winslow on the intricacies of modern finance. Intrigued, Winslow set his sights on Wall Street, where he assumed a fortune and later sent Edward $10,000 as a token of gratitude. With this windfall, Edward purchased a home for his beloved Sandra and their young son Will. In the present day, Josephine questioned Will about his love for his father, and Will lamented Edward's absence during his childhood, claiming that his father preferred his fantastical second life to their mundane reality. Josephine urged Will to speak with his father and seek understanding, but despite her encouragement, Will remained skeptical of his father's tales and demanded the truth. Edward insisted that he was simply a storyteller, weaving tales that defined his very essence. Intrigued, Will embarked on his own investigation, uncovering the existence of the elusive town of Spectre. Upon his arrival, he met the now-grown Jenny Hill, Bayman's daughter, who instantly recognized Edward's son. She shared with Will the story of her second encounter with Edward, a meeting that was long overdue. During a tumultuous thunderstorm, a young Edward found himself trapped in his car as it became submerged underwater. A vision of beauty appeared before him, the mermaid he'd encountered years ago in Spectre. Their reunion was brief as the storm passed and Edward's car was left stranded in a tree. Miraculously, he discovered his lost key to Ashton and ventured back into Spectre, only to find it transformed into a desolate ghost town. The once idyllic haven had fallen victim to the harsh realities of the outside world, with bank loans and debt leaving its residents bankrupt. Determined to save the town, Edward enlisted the help of his friends, including Winslow, the Siamese twins, and the Callaway Circus, to buy back Spectre and rescue it from financial ruin. To secure the town's future, Edward needed everyone to sign over their deeds to him and his group. The people of Spectre agreed, except for Jenny, who harbored resentment toward Edward for breaking his promise to return to her. As Will listened to Jenny's tale, he began to see the threads of truth woven into his father's stories, realizing that perhaps there was more to Edward Bloom than he had ever imagined. As Edward and Carl the Giant set to work restoring Jenny's dilapidated home, Will couldn't help but confront her about the nature of her relationship with his father. Jenny admitted that she'd harbored feelings for Edward and had even tried to act on them one night after signing over the deed to her house. However, Edward had stopped her, declaring that his heart belonged solely to his wife wife Sandra. Jane revealed that she became a part of Edward's tales, but Sandra and Will always be his true story. Upon returning to Ashton, Will discovered that his father had suffered a stroke and is now hospitalized. Despite his grave condition, Edward insisted that this was not the death that he'd foreseen in the witch's glass eye. As Will sat by his father's bedside, he spoke with the family doctor who delivered him and was now treating Edward. Seeking the truth behind his own birth, Will listened as the doctor recounted a simple ordinary story devoid of Edward's fantastical embellishments, and in that moment, Will understood that his father's tales were meant to entertain and comfort and not deceive. That fateful evening, as Edward's consciousness waned and the words failed him, Will found himself entrusted with the responsibility of narrating the final chapter of his father's life. Channeling Edward's passion for weaving fantastical stories, Will crafted an impulsive yarn about their thrilling escape from the hospital, a magnificent riverside send-off, and Edward's metamorphosis into a colossal catfish before swimming off into the unknown. Edward concurred that this way was a fitting finale to his life's tale, and shortly after, he took his last breath, leaving Will both shattered and appreciative of their ultimate bond. At Edward's memorial service, Will, Josephine, Sandra, and the family physician initially stood in solitude. However, soon a cascade of automobiles, vans, and coaches soon appeared, bearing the very protagonists from Edward's fables. Will was flabbergasted when he saw all the people from his father's stories, and they were all here assembled to honor Edward. Although each figure was somewhat less extraordinary than in Edward's narratives, Will finally grasped that his father had skillfully intertwined his passion of storytelling with his own life. In the closing scene, upon the birth of his own son, Will shares these stories with him, reflecting on how his father's legacy lives on through these tales, granting him a form of immortality. And this is how today's movie comes to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and most of all, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much, and I promise to see you on my next recap. Bye!